Alistair Heath is away this week and next week as well, so today I'm going to talk to you about politics. We have the party conference season coming up next month, so now is the kind of time when people look into the Westminster bubble and kind of think, what's going on in there and what are we set for? Now there's been some polling recently which has been quite negative for both Ed Miliband and Nick Clegg. Of course, their parties have been struggling at times, but party data tends to go up and down quite sharply and varies depending on which pollster you look at. But there's also data on the leaders themselves, and figures from Ipsos Mori in recent days showed that for around half the British public, they say that they don't know what Ed Miliband stands for and that they don't know what Nick Clegg stands for either. This is interesting because when David Cameron came in, he was often seen as a kind of Blair Mark II and was associated with populist and centrist and often non-ideological policies. But with him, these figures are actually more favourable. So for Cameron, about a third of the British public say they don't know what he stands for. That might seem pretty bad as well, but of course compared to Miliband and compared to Clegg, it's actually not as bad, at least. For Cameron, there's also more positive data when it comes to looking at the popularity of the leaders compared to their parties. So for Cameron, he's still more popular than the Conservative Party, according to polls like Ipsos Mori's. Whereas for Ed Miliband and Nick Clegg, the opposite is the case. And someone is more likely to say, I like Labour than I like Ed Miliband, and more likely to say, I like the Liberal Democrats than I like Nick Clegg. Interestingly, for Nigel Farage, it's slightly towards Cameron's side in that he's a little bit more popular than UKIP. Now, why am I telling you all this? What's the relevance? Well, as we go forward, I think we're going to see that the coalition is increasingly likely to last out this term. Lots of people thought it would break down, but it hasn't. And it seems like next year will be the last full year we have before the expected general election. So, if the leaders cannot get across to the public what they stand for, it raises the obvious question on what grounds will the general election battle be fought, especially for Miliband. If people don't know what he stands for, how's he going to convince people to vote Labour? Now, Bill Clinton famously said, it's the economy, stupid. That doesn't mean, I don't think, that every election is dependent on the economy. There have been exceptions. There have been times when parties, opposition parties, have got in when the economy's been ticking over quite nicely. There have been other times when a party has been worse off in polls that say, do you trust them with the economy? Which party do you prefer? And the party who's less trusted on the economy has still managed to get into power. So this isn't always the case, but I think with the next election, it is the case. And one of the reasons for this is that people often complain that the parties don't stand for anything and they get muddled together. But this is probably true, and we're increasingly seeing this kind of situation. And what it means is that when people don't have a distinct difference in choice between one party stands for this, another party stands for this, then those politicians become hostages to something like the economy. And we've had, of course, recently a situation where the economy's picked up in Q1 and Q2 of this year. It's doing pretty well, certainly compared to the Eurozone. And as a result, people are starting to think, well, maybe we should give the coalition the benefit of the doubt and give them another shot. Whereas when the economy is doing badly, Labour are more likely to be able to complain about it and win some people over and get more votes. Now, as I see it, this may well determine the next election then, and really politicians have nothing to complain about. This is their making. If they're not going to offer diverse opinions, then they may be vulnerable to the fortunes of something like the economy, which often they have very little control over themselves.